A genealogist, it's someone who traces people's family trees and works out where they came from and looks into their roots.
Right, so when you heard a film was coming out with George Clooney called The Descendants, were you first in the queue to go check it out?
Particularly as it's set in Hawaii, yes, although sadly I didn't get to go out there. It's always fascinating when a famous actor puts themselves forward for a very intense family drama like we've seen in The Descendants. So I just thought I'd have a little bit of a dig around to see what his own background was, which took us all the way to Ireland particularly, but also other parts of Europe as well. It's a fascinating story.
We see in the film that Matt King, George Clooney's character, has a bit of a problem with his own family, that he has to decide what to do with the land that they've been left. Do you see that now? Does that actually happen?
It does, yes. I mean, there's this whole idea of roots and identity and the connection to land. Again, it's bizarrely very much alongside his Irish characteristics as well, because land is so important in making sure that you've got roots and identity back in the homeland. So to find this paralleled in the film is quite remarkable. But it also gets a deeper sense of family connection as well. The problems he has reconnecting with his two daughters makes for some very heartwarming and also quite sad moments too. But it really gets you into the heart of family dynamics. And for me, as a genealogist, seeing this play out, it's fascinating. It doesn't matter whether it's Hawaii or Kilkenny or Tipperary or wherever. It's all about making sure that families understand each other by knowing their roots.
Why is it that important to know your background, your ancestry?
It gives you a huge sense of identity, a place in the world, particularly when there's so much fast-paced information and we conduct most of our business online, for example. It's really important to know that we came from somewhere, and also there might be relatives still waiting for us to discover, so that in one sense going back to our roots is connecting to the past and our place in the world. So in these times of austerity, make do and mend, it's really nice to know that we've got a clan out there, someone that we can perhaps rely on or uncover a little bit more about, or indeed find some sort of ancestral profession that we might want to turn our hand to today if times are tough.
Now, Nick, I'm thinking about starting off a family tree and looking back at my ancestry. Where do I start? I mean, it sounds very complicated. Is it that complicated?
It's not, no, not really. I mean, TV programmes make it look quite easy. You do need to do some preparatory steps first. Everyone assumes you just jump online and press a few buttons and out comes your family tree. It's not that simple. You need to write down everything you know about yourself and your ancestors as far back as you can. Where possible, speak to family, particularly the older members who might be able to remember people that you've never met, their grandparents or even great-grandparents. And then you have to build a family tree, which is just a simple diagram showing how people connect to one another. The next step is where you check out all of this data because, believe it or not, people sometimes forgot dates or weren't quite accurate with certain bits of storyline that they might be telling you. And to do that, you need to look at birth, marriage, death records, census returns, parish registers, particularly in Ireland, where you need to go back to the place of origin and start asking people in that area whether they know any folklore or stories that can help connect you. So it's a combination of what do I know so far, with a bit of online research, and then a good dollop of on-the-ground local searching.
Now, you mentioned people going back to their homeland, and over the last year, actually it's a year this week, we had a fairly high-profile guy called to Moneygall in County Offaly, checking out his ancestors' home place and where they came from, and that was Barack Obama. From working with celebrities yourself and high-profile characters, do you get a sense of enjoyment from them, or have they ever been shocked by their background?
Oh, they're quite often shocked, yes. I mean, I've done a lot of work on Who Do You Think You Are over the years, and despite there's now, 7 or 8 series, people still are shocked and surprised by what they found out. They think, it can't possibly affect me. But it's more the fact that they go there in person. And I know George Clooney's talked a little bit online this week about going back to his Irish roots. I think he was chatting to Bono about it, getting on a motorbike and just travelling around some of the places that we've discovered. I think really it's a sense of stripping away that celebrity that we know them today, and they're just people like the rest of us. They've all got ideas about where they came from. They've got some idea about some family story they perhaps want to confirm. More often than not, we find a completely different, perhaps more interesting story. But you do have to go there in person. So just like in the film, the setting takes place in Hawaii and it's about reconnecting to a plot of land. It's exactly the same with anybody who wants to go back to their roots. You need to do it in the place where the events happen.
Does she love it?
Drop it, Dad. You've got way bigger fish to fry than confronting some guy.
Well, what you've been going through, that's a tough deal.
I'm just trying to keep my head above water. My friends think just because I live in Hawaii, I live in paradise. Are they insane? Our families are just as screwed up. Our heartaches are just as painful. But that we're going to make it out okay. You and Scotty and me.
Now, I mentioned Obama, and I spoke to a guy that did a documentary on Obama and his roots and stuff, and he also mentioned that he was going doing some research on George Clooney, but I think you've beaten him to it, and you mentioned some Irish connections there, and it all ties in, I suppose, well, the fact that he starred in a movie called The Descendants. What have you learned about George?
Well, he's got various strands of Irish immigrant ancestry going into America, mainly around the time of the famine. 1847, 1848 in particular. The direct Clooney line have got their origins in Kilkenny in the parish of Windgap, and we can trace them back there to round about the 1830s. They then moved across and married into German ancestry and settled down and had a fairly good life. But the really interesting story comes from another branch of the family, the Guilfoyles. Now, they originated from County Tipperary. And one chap in particular, George's great-great-grandfather, Cornelius, or Con Guilfoyle, sounds like a bit of a character, a bit of a chancer perhaps. He started to run a pub, but ran into bad times. He got bankrupt on certain occasions. He was selling alcohol to minors. He was quite often accused of keeping a disorderly house. So quite a character when he moved across to the States. And his son fell for one of the daughters of the local landowners, and it looks like they had to elope, mainly because I think her father wasn't too impressed about her marrying into this son of a publican. So again, family tensions is echoed through the ages, just like in The Descendants, where we've got George falling out with his daughters and trying to repair the damage. It's exactly the same in his own background, this tension between the Guilfoyles and the Farrows, who were the local Americans, playing out, and the estrangement between the father and the daughter, who ran off and married the son of the publican. So history, in many ways, repeats itself. So there's some very nice parallels there.
The film itself, it deals with the topic of a person's history and a family history. Do you think it has a lot of resonance for your own life? I mean, have you looked back on your own history? It sounds great to be looking on high-profile celebrities and stuff, the likes of Victoria Beckham and Richard Hammond and stuff. Have you actually checked out your own background?
Oh, you really have to practice what you preach, don't you? I've done a bit of digging, and I was really quite surprised to find that my great-uncle was a Soviet spy in the 1930s. So maybe one day they'll do a film about that. But sadly not as exotic as Hawaii. It all took place in West London. But still quite an amazing story.
Yeah, that was my other question, is that from people you've found out about, have they had bad connections, as in, I don't know, someone related to, God forbid, Jack the Ripper or someone like that, or someone that they've really been disgusted by? Is there any you can tell us about?
Yeah, we had one story for Who Do You Think You Are, which we couldn't actually put forward because it would have impacted upon modern day ancestors still living in Ireland. So we had to be very careful, because the thing about the past is that it still does have this resonance in the present. But I guess one of the most high-profile cases relates to a celebrity who, again, wasn't used for the show but was reported in the newspapers. And it turns out that his great-great-grandfather, at the age of 45, married a 13-year-old. Now, that was quite a shocking revelation, and they were rather surprised to find that out. So, yeah, we do find some stories which perhaps go a little bit too close to the bone, and we have to take a very strong editorial line about whether or not we broadcast them.
At the moment, are you researching anyone exciting, or what are you doing at the moment? Or have you any books or TV shows coming up?
Everyone's exciting. It just depends on how hard you have to look for that one key story. At the moment, I'm just finishing off a book on Greater London, which should be out later this year. But for the most of the time, I'm trying to work on getting ancestry into schools and getting a new generation of people enthused. So that, I think, will keep me busy for the rest of the year. And
Nick, with a surname of Murphy, I think I'm going to have my work cut out, I think, tracing back my ancestors, because there seems to be Murphys all over the globe. But Nick Barrett, genealogist to the stars, it's been great to chat to you about the film The Descendants, which is out now on DVD and Blu-ray. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.